The debate over who has the authority to order military strikes on Iran is ongoing in Congress, with some lawmakers arguing that President Trump has the right, as commander-in-chief, to execute a surgical process without congressional approval. Others argue that Congress must adopt a resolution before sending service personnel into hostilities abroad under the aegis of war. The 2001 Authorization for Use of Military Force, AUMF, is still in place, which some lawmakers argue justifies American involvement in Iran. However, most foreign policy and military experts argue that the 2001 and 2002 AUMFs are calcified, legislative relics. The debate highlights the complexities of war powers and the role of Congress in authorizing military action. Indiana Pacers star Tyrese Haliburton reportedly suffered a devastating Achilles injury during the team's NBA Finals Game 7 loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder on Sunday. The Pacers guard was the third player to suffer the devastating injury, with Boston Celtics star Jason Tatum and Milwaukee Bucks star Damian Lillard also dealing with torn Achilles tendons during the playoffs. Haliburton will likely miss the entirety of the 2025-26 season due to the injury. The U.S. attack on Iran's nuclear sites has caused severe damage, with analysts saying it may have crippled the Islamic Republic's atomic ambitions. The strikes hit three key facilities, including Natanz and Fordo, with Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane stating that all three sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. While some experts believe Iran's nuclear program has been significantly weakened, others argue it may not be completely destroyed. Former Israeli Prime Minister Amos Yadlin called the attack a game-changer, saying President Donald Trump's doctrine of peace through strength is in action. However, analysts also warned that military pressure alone may not bring lasting resolution unless paired with a diplomatic agreement or credible threat of continued strikes. An experimental weight loss medication, amycretin, developed by Novo Nordisk, has shown promising results in helping patients lose nearly a quarter of their body weight. In the study, participants who received weekly injections of amycretin lost more weight than those who took a placebo. The most common side effects were gastrointestinal symptoms, primarily nausea and vomiting. Further studies are needed to ensure that the therapeutic benefits consistently outweigh the potential risks. A CNN analyst has suggested that President Donald Trump could be remembered as a hero after launching a strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. John Miller, the chief law enforcement analyst for CNN, wrote in an op-ed that Trump's decision to target Iran's nuclear sites could have significant consequences and potentially even make him a hero. Miller pointed out that reports from the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, showed that Iran had exceeded agreed limits on uranium enrichment levels and was expanding its missile capabilities. He argued that this behavior is not consistent with civilian energy programs, suggesting that Iran may be preparing to deliver a nuclear weapon quickly if given orders by Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Miller's comments come as Trump has faced criticism from Democrats and some of his own supporters for the decision to strike Iran's nuclear sites. Sean Strickland, a former UFC middleweight champion, expressed his concerns about the U.S. military strikes on Iranian nuclear sites over the weekend. In a social media post, he questioned how the action would benefit the average American and urged President Donald Trump not to get involved in Israel's war. Iran retaliated by firing missiles at the United States Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, but most were intercepted. Trump called Iran's response very weak. The incident has sparked debate about the U.S. military's actions and their impact on Americans. The Supreme Court has granted the Trump administration's request to stay a lower court injunction blocking them from deporting individuals to third countries without prior notice. The 6-3 decision comes after a flurry of lower court challenges aimed at blocking Trump's immigration crackdown in his second White House term. Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson dissented. The ruling allows the administration to move forward with deporting migrants to countries not explicitly named in their removal orders. Rep. Jared Golden, a moderate Democrat from Maine, has expressed support for President Donald Trump's airstrikes on Iran over the weekend. In a statement, Golden said he believes the president was right to launch limited strikes to deter Iran's nuclear program. The House-wide briefing on the situation in Iran is expected to occur at 3 p.m. Tuesday. Golden won his seat in Maine's 2nd Congressional District by less than 1% in 2024, while Trump carried the district by 10%. Florida's Attorney General asked the Supreme Court on Monday to allow the state to proceed with enforcing a controversial immigration law that seeks to criminalize the arrival or re-entry of illegal migrants to the state. The law was blocked earlier this year by a federal judge in Miami, and the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals declined to lift the injunction. Florida Attorney General James Uffmeyer argued that the Supreme Court should intervene and reverse the lower court rulings, which he described as detrimental to both state and national interests. Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn introduced legislation to penalize those who dox federal law enforcement, amid a 500% surge in assaults on immigration and customs enforcement (ICE) agents. The Protecting Law Enforcement from Doxing Act aims to make it illegal to release the name of a federal officer if there was an intention to obstruct criminal or immigration proceedings. Blackburn rode along with ICE officers in Rutherford County, Tennessee, where they were targeting an illegal immigrant convicted of child sexual abuse. The senator's legislation comes after Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell faced backlash for releasing the names of federal officers, which resulted in doxing accusations. The Department of Homeland Security reported a 500% increase in assaults on ICE agents, with a recent hit-and-run case allegedly perpetrated by a Venezuelan illegal immigrant in Nashville making national waves. U.S. President Donald Trump has taken a swipe at former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev for suggesting that other countries would supply Iran with nuclear warheads in retaliation for the U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Trump called Medvedev's comments casual and said the N-word should not be treated so casually. The U.S. has been increasing its military presence in the Middle East amid rising tensions with Iran, which has vowed to retaliate against the U.S. strikes. The body of Juan Chaidez, a 6-year veteran firefighter-paramedic with Dallas Fire Rescue, was found on Monday morning at Lavon Lake in Collin County, Texas. Chaidez had been reported missing after his kayak overturned on the lake over the weekend. His dog, which was with him at the time, survived the incident and was recovered by rescuers. The Collin County Sheriff's Office extended its condolences to Chaidez's family and colleagues, thanking agencies that assisted in the search. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is demanding President Donald Trump and his senior officials justify the U.S. military's recent strikes in Iran, saying they have seen no evidence to date that an offensive strike of this nature was justified under the War Powers Act or the Constitution. Jeffries claimed he had not seen a scintilla of evidence to date that shows there was an imminent threat to the United States of America. The House Democratic leader said he requested a briefing Tuesday for the Gang of Eight, the informal name for the top party and intelligence leaders in Congress. Trump greenlit airstrikes on 3 of Tehran's major nuclear sites over the weekend. MSNBC host Joe Scarborough defended President Donald Trump's decision to strike Iran's nuclear sites, suggesting other presidents would have made the same choice. Scarborough argued that past presidents wouldn't have felt compelled to take the strike if they knew Iran was being attacked by the United Nations. Washington Post columnist David Ignatius agreed, stating that 3 previous presidents considered this scenario but pulled back due to uncertainties. MSNBC contributor Katty Kay added that Iran's weakened position over the last year gave Trump a unique set of circumstances. American brews claimed most of the top prizes in their respective categories at the 2025 World Beer Cup, with West Coast breweries leading the way. California beers received 76 total medals, the most of any U.S. state, followed by Oregon, 35, Washington, 24, and Colorado, 21. The competition attracted 8,375 entries from 49 countries, with American brews dominating in categories such as juicy or hazy India Pale Ales, IPAs. Anti-Israel activist Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia University graduate student, was released on bail from an immigration detention center after claiming his detention felt like kidnapping. He stated that the rule of law only exists for those with money and that he believes his anti-Israel protests were not anti-Semitic. The Department of Homeland Security has said that Khalil purposely did not reveal his employment with the Syrian office in the British Embassy in Beirut when applying for permanent U.S. residency. An immigration judge ruled that Khalil could be removed from the country based on a memo from Secretary of State Marco Rubio stating that his campus protests were not aligned with U.S. foreign policy interests. Coastal Carolina head coach Kevin Schnall was ejected in the first inning of the Men's College World Series after an argument with home plate umpire Angel Campos. Schnall claimed he was wrongly accused of bumping an umpire who appeared to trip and fall to the ground. The NCAA stated that Schnall was arguing balls and strikes, which triggered a 2-game suspension for him and his first base coach, Matt Schilling. Coastal Carolina Athletic Director Chance Miller expressed disappointment with the ejection, stating it altered the trajectory of a must-win game for their team. The U.S. military launched a historic mission, Operation Midnight Hammer, from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, where the entire world collection of B-2 stealth bombers is based. The bombers flew across the Atlantic to strike key Iranian nuclear sites, dropping massive bunker busters before returning home. President Donald Trump praised the operation as a spectacular military success. Critics argue that the president should have sought congressional approval before taking action. Actress Rachel Zegler, who starred in Disney's Snow White live-action reboot, said she is not concerned about how her views on Gaza affect her career. In an interview with ID, Zegler stated that her compassion has no boundaries and that she supports various causes without denouncing others. The actress faced backlash for comments critical of the 1937 version of Snow White and expressed anti-Israel views in social media posts. Despite the controversy, Zegler said she will take the risk of being outspoken and chooses positivity over negativity. She also discussed dealing with the film's poor reception, revealing that she saw a psychiatrist and got on anxiety medication. A former Clinton-era National Security Council staffer broke with his party to praise President Donald Trump's successful strikes on Iran over the weekend, while remarking that former Vice President Kamala Harris would have likely lacked the courage to execute such a mission if she were commander-in-chief. Jamie Metzl, founder of the international social group One Shared World, posted to X on Saturday evening, praising Trump for taking bold steps defending America's interests. Metzl served on former President Bill Clinton's National Security Council and was former President Joe Biden's Deputy Staff Director of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He heaped praise on Trump repeatedly on X over the weekend, while also taking a shot at Harris's lack of courage and fortitude. The strikes obliterated Iranian nuclear facilities and backed the nation into a corner to make a peace deal, Trump said. This mission was also celebrated by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, as one that was cloaked in secrecy and intentionally deceptive to confuse the enemy. The world is a fundamentally different place than it was in the 2000s, said Steve Yates, Heritage Foundation's senior China and National Security Policy Studies fellow. The differences between the Bush and Trump administrations' approaches to the Middle East are significant, with Trump focusing on using decisive force to prevent Iranian nuclear proliferation. A suspected member of the violent Venezuelan street gang Tren de Aragua TDA, is in federal custody after allegedly attempting to kill one law enforcement officer and injuring another during a traffic stop. Gabriel Hurtado Carriacum, 30, is charged with 1 count of attempted murder of a federal officer and 1 count of assault of a federal officer with infliction of bodily injury. He faces the possibility of up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine if convicted. Country music singer Ronnie McDowell was rushed to the hospital on Saturday after reportedly slurring his words mid-performance at the Summer Solstice Music Festival in Pennsylvania. The singer spent days in the hospital, according to his son, Tyler Dean McDowell. McDowell had a mini-stroke while performing on June 22. He gained fame in the 1970s with hits like Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator Dr. Mehmet Oz argued that the GOP's plan to reform the healthcare program would benefit rural hospitals, not harm them. He claimed that only 5% of inpatient Medicaid spending happens in rural communities, and that the bill targets abuses overwhelmingly utilized by large hospitals with well-connected lobbyists. Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan broke his silence on the Karen Reed case, warning that the behavior of her most vocal supporters threatens the American legal system as it is known. Jurors found Reed not guilty of all homicide-related charges last week in her second trial over the death of John O'Keefe, a Boston police officer, and her former boyfriend. Brennan said he was disappointed in the verdict and the fact that they could not achieve justice for John O'Keefe and his family.